Hungary has been on the front lines of Europe's migrant crisis for years now. Tough new law came into force there, giving border authorities new power to detain asylum seekers indefinitely and house them in converted shipping containers until their cases are heard. The UN says the measure is illegal. The country's hardline prime minister, Viktor Orban, says it'll save Europe.
Mindaddig napirenden marad, amíg mindenhol be nem látják, hogy a migráció a terrorizmus trójai falova.
I'm warning you that you're at the Hungarian border. I'm warning you to hold back from committing this crime.
Picture this, a continent in turmoil, not from a pandemic or war, but from an immigration crisis with its borders flooded with desperate migrants seeking refuge from war and poverty. This was Europe during the immigration crisis of the early 2010s.
Of migrants trying to make it deeper into Europe.
The European Union is claiming
human rights.
That people are drowning on its doorstep. EU is struggling to deal with migration, with severe consequences.
A very deep crisis. This is a crisis that is about real interest, but it's also about identity, and it's about important political principles.
We have a European Union policy which was a fair weather policy, and we were in 2015 in a perfect storm.
Je l'ai dit au Parlement luxembourgeois, la migration sera le point fort de notre présidence.
Chaque État membre seul ne pourra pas régler cette question. C'est très difficile, la situation est très difficile, mais on espère bien qu'on finira avec le temps par trouver une solution.
And if you can remember, the year 2015 was the worst as thousands of people left their home country for one reason or the other and streamed into Europe illegally, day after day. You can imagine the pressure the whole continent felt because allowing these migrants into their country meant they had to share their limited resources. But amidst the chaos, one country stood out for its controversial approach, Hungary. This approach, though controversial, was a responding success.
Military Humvees with gun mounts patrolling the EU's Schengen ramparts. Overnight, Hungary's parliament had passed a law deploying troops.
Viktor Orban has said that there is a clear link between illegal migrants heading to Europe and a rising threat of terrorism. Orban used such reasoning to justify his conservative government's tough anti-immigration stance and its erection of a 4-meter-high fence along its border with Serbia.
Teaches that it proves virtually impossible to hold people back as long until the final point when the wall of separation, the wall of sealing has been constructed.
So how did Hungary beat the immigration crisis? Let's find out. It was the year 2015, and Europe found itself in the midst of an unprecedented wave of migration, triggered by conflicts in Syria and other parts of the Middle East. As hundreds of thousands of migrants crossed into the European Union, Hungary found itself on the front lines of this crisis. Mind you, it wasn't just a few hundred people crossing the border. We are talking about thousands of people, specifically 13,000 people every single day. Can you imagine the strain on the Hungarian economy? Although, to be fair, most of the migrants were not planning on staying in Hungary permanently. Most of them were just passing through to get to more prosperous European countries. However, the influx was still too much for Hungary to bear. Scenes of chaos and uncertainty played out daily at Hungary's borders. So, the government was faced with a critical decision, that is, how to respond to this influx while balancing humanitarian concerns with national security. Then came Hungary's Prime Minister, Viktor Orban. For Hungary's prime minister, the best decision was to take a bold stance. He argued that mass immigration posed a threat to Hungary's cultural identity and security. He said, "We cannot allow our country to be overwhelmed by masses of people whose identities and intentions are unknown to us. Hungary must remain Hungarian."
The migrants are not just banging on our door, they're breaking it down. Not a few hundred, not a few thousand, but several hundreds of thousands. Actually, millions of migrants are laying siege to Hungary's and Europe's borders. There is no end in sight. Their reserves are vast, and millions are preparing to travel.
So, in response, his government implemented controversial measures to secure Hungary's borders and control the flow of migrants. Orban's policies included the construction of border fences, strict immigration laws, and a strong rhetoric against what he termed external forces dictating Hungary's fate. Speaking of border fences, the construction of a border fence along its southern borders with Serbia and Croatia was one of the cornerstones of Hungary's response to the immigration crisis. Completed in 2015, these fences were designed to deter illegal crossings and funnel migrants towards official border checkpoints. The fence sent a pretty clear message to migrants that, hey, you are not welcome. Not only did they put up these barbed fences, but they also ramped up security with armed patrols and installed cameras to monitor the border around the clock. We know you think these measures are harsh, yeah. But if you think about it from Hungary's perspective, they were simply doing what needed to be done to protect their sovereignty and the safety of their citizens. Now get this, the Hungarian government went further to build a second barrier, which interestingly was built by local inmates. Talk about cutting costs down. This second line of defense makes it practically impossible for any migrants to cross the border without being caught. The second barrier is just as formidable as the first, and according to reports costs more than $130 million, an amount though huge, but one that the Hungarian government deemed necessary. Construction of border and armed patrols were just the initial steps taken to control the crisis. There were more stricter measures implemented which sent a message to the rest of Europe that the country would not be overrun and the government was ready to defend its borders. So, what other measures were implemented? First, the law gave unprecedented power to border authorities, meaning that they could detain asylum seekers indefinitely. Yes, you heard that right. According to the law, if any migrant is caught trying to cross the Hungarian border illegally, the border authorities have every right to hold them until their case is fully heard and decided. This means no more slipping through the cracks or endless appeals that drag on forever. It sounds like an inhumane thing to do, but for Hungary, it was a necessity to stop the endless flow of migrants into the country. Now here comes the big question. Where are those who are detained taken to? Well, as opposed to traditional refugee camps, Hungary decided to use shipping containers, which were converted into houses to house the asylum seekers. These containers, which you know get really hot in summer and crazy cold in winter, are set up close to the border and act as a temporary holding facility. It's certainly not luxurious, but it's functional. However, there is no privacy, as each container can house several individuals and they are equipped with the basic necessities. Normally, it's not a place any average person would want to start, but actually, that's the whole point. The Hungarian authorities designed it in that way, so it can act as a deterrent and make the conditions less appealing for migrants. So first, they set up a border fence with armed soldiers patrolling the fence, which sends the message, "You are not welcome." Then the law that says migrants caught crossing into the country illegally can be detained indefinitely, where they will have to live in an uncomfortable container-turned house. That was a pretty strong message to potential migrants. Compared to other European countries' systems of dealing with migrants, the Hungarian system is far tougher, and let me tell you, it doesn't give preference to anybody. Migrants, including women and children, are held in these containers, and they cannot leave unless their asylum applications are approved. The worst part is that most of the applications are more likely to be rejected, and when that happens, the migrants are sent back to the border. So essentially, Hungary was not just trying to deal with the crisis in the short term, it was a long-term approach. And not surprisingly, it worked. The number of migrants reduced drastically. However, despite this approach, the controversial measures taken by the Hungarian government were met with criticism. Orbán's government justified these measures as necessary to protect Hungary's sovereignty and prevent the uncontrollable influx of migrants. Critics, however, condemned these actions as harsh and inhumane. According to some human rights activists, Hungary's approach to the immigration crisis was deeply troubling. It showed a disregard for international humanitarian norms and placed vulnerable people in precarious situations. But despite the international backlash, what cannot be denied by all is that Hungary's approach yielded tangible results. The number of migrants entering Hungary drastically decreased, and the country maintained a firm grip on its borders. Now, not only did Orbán's government also implement legislative changes, including toughening asylum laws and introducing criminal penalties for illegal border crossings, it also positioned itself as a voice against what it saw as forced multiculturalism and the erosion of national identity within the European Union. The Prime Minister positioned Hungary as a defender of national sovereignty and critic of what he termed mandatory quotas for distributing refugees among EU member countries. According to the Prime Minister, we have the right to decide who we allow to enter our country. We must protect our people and our culture. Orbán's rhetoric has resonated with populist movements across Europe, sparking debates about the balance between nation autonomy and EU solidarity in addressing migration challenges. But guess what? A lot of Hungarian citizens are on board with the law and Orban's policies. Polls showed that a majority of Hungarians backed Orban's policies, viewing them as crucial for safeguarding national security and cultural identity. But the question is, did Hungary go too far, or did they do what needed to be done? The answer to this is that the situation is complicated. Think about it. Some of the migrants are actually fleeing from dangerous situations back in their home country. Take Ashar, for instance. Asher is a 24-year-old guy from Iran who has been stuck in Sevilla for several months because his name was taken off the list to enter Hungary due to some clerical errors. In this kind of situation, it's clearly not the fault of Asher, but he is suffering the consequences. This guy is just trying to get to somewhere safer and better, but he has been caught up in some red tape stuff. But it's not just Asher. There are a lot of folks from different parts of the world, including Libya, that have been detained for months and have been complaining of poor living conditions, including children and young people. The situation is tough, but then again, Hungary is a sovereign country that has the right to accept or reject people whether they are asylum seekers or not into their country. So as we said, the situation is complicated. Hungary's handling of the immigration crisis left a lasting impact on both its domestic policies and its relations within the European Union. Orban's stance resonated with populist movements across Europe, shaping debates on immigration, sovereignty, and national identity. But what do you think? Did Hungary take the right approach to deal with its crisis? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video.